This is the Vivid Washcloth. It's been designed as a washcloth to use in the kitchen or the bathroom. It's crocheted and it has a really nice V-stitch pattern that looks great in a couple of contrasting colours, whether these are quite high contrast like the jade green and lavender that I've used here, or if you wanted to use a more subtle colour contrast like a cream and a beige, for example, the pattern will still stand out really nicely. You could use it as a mat, perhaps for your bedside table, or a stand to place a hot pot on. You could even make a set of them without the hanging loop to use as placemats on the table, and perhaps some miniature versions without the last 4 rounds to use as coasters as well. That would be great for a tea set. I really like its vintage look, especially with the ruffled edging. I've deliberately kept the ruffled edging fairly light and open with lots of chain spaces so that it can dry off easily. I don't want it to take ages to dry every time it's washed. And the hanging loop makes it really handy for hanging up in your bathroom or your kitchen. It has a fairly open texture through the stitch as well, so I wouldn't recommend using this or making this to use as a pot holder. It works up really quickly, and so it's also great to make as a gift, or if you sell crocheted items, it would be perfect for that. Let's see how it's made. To make the Vivid Washcloth, you're going to want 2 different colours of cotton yarn. I'm using here Yarn Smith's Cotton Aran, but any worsted weight or Aran weight cotton yarn will do. You'll want a hook to match the size of your yarn. I'm using a 4.5mm hook, which is a US 7 or G+. If your yarn recommends a 5mm hook or a US H hook, you could use that instead. And of course, you may want to adjust for your own tension. You'll also want some stitch markers to make identifying where to increase easier. You'll want 8 in total, and here I've got 6 of them for marking the increases and 2 of them for marking the start of the round in each of the different colours, and also for securing each of the yarns when we're not working with it, when we're using the other yarn. I'll start with a slip knot and work 4 chains in colour 1. Make a slip stitch in the first of those chains and back into the centre of the 4 chain loop you've made. If you like, you can trap the yarn tail inside the stitch and continue to do that as you work around the 4 chain loop with row 1. So we'll continue row 1 with colour 1. We'll work 3 chains. The first 2 chains count as a UK half treble or US half double crochet, and the final chain counts as a chain space of the V-stitch. Next we'll work a UK half treble or a US half double crochet back into the 4 chain loop. And that's our first V-stitch. You can see here's the first side of the V-stitch, here's the second side, and here is the 1 chain space. We now need to work 5 more V-stitches around the 4 chain loop. But before we do that, we'll mark the position between each of the V-stitches to help make them easier to work. This isn't essential. If you think you will easily recognise where the V-stitch is with its chain space and where to work between the V-stitches to make the increases, then you don't need to place the stitch markers there, but I'll do that to make it a bit clearer in the video. The remaining V-stitches will be worked with a UK half treble or US half double on each side and a chain space in the middle. So there's the first stitch, there's the chain space, and there's the second stitch. So this is our next V-stitch. We're placing the marker around the loop on the hook and the working yarn. Let's pull that a little bit further away so you can see. So there are 3 strands of yarn inside the stitch marker, and that helps us to mark the position between each of the V-stitches. Now I'm making 4 more V-stitches and positioning a marker after each of them in the same way. So I'll have 6 V-stitches in total and 6 markers. It's easy to forget to put a marker after the final V-stitch, but make sure before you close this around that you have all 6 markers in place. Now, to find the correct place to join the round, we note that this is the top of this stitch, this is the chain space of our first V-stitch, and these 2 chains here form the first half of the V-stitch. They're standing in place of a stitch, and so we'll work into the top of the second one. So that's round 1 finished, and we'll be changing to colour 2 now, but we don't want to fasten off colour 1. We want to keep the live loop on a stitch marker like this. I've used a different colour stitch marker so that I can easily see which markers are holding the live loops and which markers are showing me where to make an increase. I'll start by making a slip knot with colour 2, and I like to join the yarn on the opposite side from where the rows start and end with colour 1. It just makes it less bulky around the join. So I can join in any of the chain spaces. Now we can see the chain spaces quite easily here. They're forming the corners on this hexagon, the little points here and here, so they bulge out slightly, and when we pull the stitches apart we can see that that's a chain space there. When we try and pull apart around the markers, we can't pull the stitches very far because there's no chain there, so we can see easily this is the chain space. So I'll work a slip stitch there to join the yarn in, and just as I did in round 1, I'm going to work 3 chains. First 2 count as our first stitch in the V-stitch, the third counts as the chain space of our V-stitch, and then we'll work a UK half treble or US half double crochet to complete the V-stitch, and there we can see the V shape of it. So we've made our first V-stitch. Now our second V-stitch is going to go in the marked position here. This isn't a stitch, it's not a chain space, we're working between 2 stitches. And we're going to work a V-stitch there as well. So we'll do UK half treble or US half double, a chain, and then a second half treble or half double into the same place. And we can continue to do that all the way around, working once into the centre of the V-stitch with its chain space, forming that little corner or bump there, and again into the marked space next to it. When we reach the stitch marker that's holding the live loop, we want to be careful not to separate the live loop that we're holding and the working yarn leading back to the ball. As we're working into the chain space of this V-stitch before it, we're holding them both out of the way in this direction. And when we work into the marked position here, to make sure that the yarn tail leading to the working yarn and the live loop are on the same side, we're going to hold them both over here. Let's hold the stitch marker out of the way there as well. And make sure that the live loop and the working yarn are between this stitch and that stitch. They're in the same position. That will make it easier to pick up the yarn again on the next round. Now, after you've worked into your last V-stitch, don't forget to make the increase between the last stitch of the previous round and the first stitch of the previous round. It's one of the reasons that I use the stitch markers. If I forget the stitch markers, I often miss that increase at the end of the round. Now at this point you might want to check that you've got 12 V-stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 if you have more than 12 stitches, you might have worked 2 V-stitches into the same space, and if you have fewer, you've probably missed working a V-stitch into one of the marked positions between the V-stitches. I did mention particularly the last one is easy to miss. So again, let's join that. We've got the stitch, the chain space, and the top of the rising chain for the round. There we go. So that's where we'll slip stitch. Now we want the other stitch marker ready to hold that yarn loop in place, and we're ready to work the next round. Now the rounds that we're working in colour 1 don't have any increases, so we won't need to move the stitch markers. What we'll want to do is go back to the live loop we had there, and again you can take your stitch marker off. I tend to leave them attached because otherwise I lose them. We're going to work 1 chain at the back, and that helps to move us across to the next stitch. To get a really smooth change of colour, rather than slip stitching in the top there, we're actually going to pull the live loop through. So hold the live loop open, slide your hook through the first V-stitch or the nearest V-stitch, tighten the loop on the hook and pull it through. And you can see that gives a lovely even colour change there. You're going to work 3 chains here to start your first V-stitch, and a UK half treble or US half double to complete the V-stitch. And you can see, you can't see really that that's the one where the yarn has been joined. Now on this round, you're not working any increases, you're just working a V-stitch into each of the V-stitches. So look for those chain spaces and take care not to work between the V-stitches. Look for the chain spaces and work in there. And again, at the end of the round, you should have 12 V-stitches. Don't forget to hold the live loop and the working yarn together, so that they don't get trapped either side of a stitch. So when you finish round 3, check that you have 12 stitches. If you have an extra stitch, check whether you've worked into any of the spaces between the stitches. If you have fewer than that, you possibly have missed one of the V-stitches. Join to the top of the first V-stitch. Then we can place that on our stitch marker. This is why I quite like having them there. They're always in the right place when I want them. And then we're going to look at starting again with colour 2. We'll want to start by working a chain at the back of the yarn. And then again, we're going to bring it through the next stitch. Bring the live loop through, and we're ready to start this round. However, what we want to do is make sure that we're doing our increases every 2 V-stitches. So you can see we have 2 V-stitches here. So I'm going to take one of my markers and place it at that point. And I'll want to make an increase here. So I'll work a V-stitch in this V-stitch, a V-stitch in this V-stitch, and then I'll want to make another increase between them. And the same all the way around. Your last stitch marker should go in here just before the stitch that you've pulled the yarn through. So there we have our 6 stitch markers in position after the 2nd stitch, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th and 12th stitches. So we're now going to work first V-stitch as usual, using 2 chains on the first side and a UK half treble or US half double on the second side, chain space in the middle, and then just as we did the first time we worked with colour 2, we'll be working our increase V-stitch into this position here where there's a marker. So now we've got 2 V-stitches to work into and another marker to work the increase. There you can see where we had 2 stitches here, we've now got 3 V-stitches, 2 stitches here, 3 V-stitches there, and we're going to be doing the same thing all the way around, taking care not to forget our final increase, and we should have 18 V-stitches at the end. As always, don't forget to work your final V-stitch increase in the last marked position. You can do your slip stitch in the upper of the 2 chains that formed the first stitch of that V-stitch, and that joins your round, and then again you can secure the live loop while you work with the other colour. So this sets up our repeat. We'll bring through the purple yarn in this stitch here, and then we'll work a V-stitch in each V-stitch chain space, and with the colour 1 we won't be working any increases, the lilac colour. When we work again with colour 2, we'll bring this yarn through the nearest V-stitch, and then we'll set up our stitch markers 3 V-stitches apart and make a 4th V-stitch in this section there, and that keeps this piece nice and flat. It makes a flat circle, not a bowl shape or a kind of ruffled shape. Then we'll repeat that again with colour 1 with no increases and colour 2 with increases, and on that time we'll place the stitch markers 4 V-stitches apart, and we could continue working for a long time and it would remain a nice flat circle that doesn't curve or distort, following that same pattern of increasing every 2 rounds. So once we've done that repeat twice more, so we have 8 rounds in total, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then another 4, then we can start working the border. So now we've finished the centre of the cloth with our 2 extra repeats of rows 3 and 4. Row 3, working 1 stitch in each V-stitch all the way around with no increases, and row 3 and 4 making an increase at 6 points around the hexagon that we're making. So you can see we've worked a V-stitch into each of these 3 V-stitches and then made another V-stitch as an increase before the next V-stitch on the first repeat of row 4, and then on the second repeat of row 4 we worked a V-stitch into these 4 V-stitches and then made our increase here before the next V-stitch as we worked around, and so we now have 30 V-stitches around the edge and we're ready to work the border. The border is ruffled in style and it's going to be worked in colour 1, so I can now fasten off colour 2. I'll weave the end in later. So let's start working here with colour 1 again. I'm using the same hook, the 4.5mm hook that I used before. And this time I'm going to work 2 chains at the back because I want to work into the back loop of the previous round rather than pulling it through the V-stitch, so it needs to travel a little bit further. So those 2 chains allow it to reach up to the top of the stitches. You could have removed your stitch markers at this point. I don't tend to remove my stitch markers until I need them again or until I'm finished, so they'll probably just sit there until the project is finished. We'll be working into the back loop of each stitch and chain all the way around. So I'm just going to work into the nearest one, which is this one here. And I'll start by slip stitching into it just to join the chains that I did to reach the height of the stitch. Now I'm going to make 4 chains, and these are going to count as 1 UK treble, the first 3, and a chain space. And that's what I'm going to be working into each stitch around. I'll be working into the back loop. I'll be working 1 UK treble, also known as in the US as a double crochet. And then I'll be working a chain. And that's what's going to create our ruffled edging. So a UK treble or US double in the back loop and a chain. We'll keep working that all the way around the cloth, and when we get to the end we'll have a look. So with our last stitch and chain complete, I'm going to join in the third of those chains here, making sure I still leave the fourth chain as a chain space before the next stitch. And I know a lot of people like a hanging loop on their washcloths, so I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 chains, and that should fit easily on the hook I have to hang my washcloths on, and then I'll work another slip stitch back in there. You could work more chains if you had a larger hanging hook than I have, or fewer if you wanted a shorter hanging loop. Let's fasten off there. And we can weave in our ends at the back. And I think that's worked out really nicely. I'm very pleased with this one. I like the way the colours have worked out together, and the frill, it's just the right amount of ruffle. If you didn't want a ruffled version though, you could simply work a shorter stitch all the way around the outside without any of the chain spaces to create a nice border for it, and you might want to do a slip stitch edging over the top of that too. You could leave it just as it is. You could easily make it bigger by repeating row 3 and 4 more times, each time moving the stitch marker 1 V-stitch further on. You could leave it without the hanging loop if you don't want it. And if you have any of my other Vivid patterns, there are 2 other optional edgings that you could use that will work out with this pattern as well.